Hello again. I'm back with another clock to repair, and this one has an interesting story. Someone contacted their local Facebook group asking if they knew anyone who could repair a clock, and a neighbor of mine saw the post, told me about it, so I reached out to the individual and said, send me some photos of it so I can give you an idea whether or not I thought I could repair it. It's a United Mantel clock. It's a metal case, appears to be cast iron, and it's missing a lot of parts. I don't know if I'm going to be successful in getting this one to work. When I turn it over, it's missing the back plate, which is what holds the movement. So I have to try to come up with something to replace that. There was a plate here that's missing, as well as one from the bottom. And the way this is supposed to work, from what I'm seeing, there's a light and there's a drum here which rotates, and that gives the illusion of a fireplace light working. And there's two people sitting in chairs here, and I believe that these are supposed to move as the clock works. And there are some gears on the back here. See if I can show it. That as the motor spins, it turns these gears, which works the people sitting in the chairs. Now this particular clock, it's a United, which was a Brooklyn, New York company, but they were purchased by the Sessions clock company. And this is a Sessions motor. And these are next to impossible to repair. They're hard to lubricate if they're not working. So I have to check to see if this motor is still working, if I'm able to lubricate it enough to get it to go. That's going to be, I think, the hardest part of the job. The first thing I want to do is check the circuit to see if it's intact. I'll use my ohm meter. I just have to touch the leads to the end of the plug, and if everything is connected properly, you'll see numbers flashing here. And yeah, we have contact. Okay, the circuit's intact, which means in theory it should be repairable as long as I can get the motor working. One thing I'm realizing when I said there was missing a plate on the bottom, that's not the case. This was left open on purpose. It just seems to be cast with this as a base to sit on, but there's no holes or screws for anything to be held here. So since the circuit is intact, I'm going to give it a try by plugging it in. Okay, let me turn it on. And not working. If you notice, as I rotate the motor, it's turning the drum. And this is sort of a foil with different colors in it, and I think as that rotates, it's supposed to give the illusion of a fireplace. I'm also noticing the gears over here turning, which I think part of it makes this turn, and it must have something to do with getting the people to move. There's a light bulb here with a button here, let's see. So that's working. And there's an on-off switch here, okay, which moves this away from the gear. So off means that this won't rotate. When it's in this position, it'll work. Let's see what happens if I rotate it with the light on. And there you can see like a fire burning, kind of clever. So I think there's two issues I have to deal with. One is figuring out if I can get the motor working, and then figuring out how these people are supposed to move. So let me get set up and I'll start to take it apart. I want to take out the movement first, but what I'm seeing is it's attached to this large metal plate, which is part of this whole gear assembly. So I have to take a closer look to figure out how I'm going to get this out of here. So let me do that, and once I know what I'm doing, I'll continue. Okay, what I'm seeing is this plate seems to be held in place by a nut here, as well as this lever, turning it on and off. So let's see if I can remove these first. Okay. Now let's see what happens. This is really quite interesting how this is put together. Let's see if I can remove this bulb so I don't risk breaking it. Okay, what I'm seeing, I think, a couple of nuts down here, which I think connects this plate to the movement. And if I undo those, I can probably separate it. So let me work on that on my own, and once they're removed, I'll continue. I was able to remove the 4 nuts, and I'm noticing a couple of things. One is the movement is not really separating, well, it's separating from the plate, but this long stem with the gear attached to it is preventing me from sliding it out. I also noticed when I moved the clock aside a small nut, which I'm thinking might have been what this screw was attached to, and that's what held these 2 plates together. And when I get this further apart, I'm probably going to find 3 more of these floating around, so that could be a bit of a challenge. Anyway, I got to take a lot longer look at this to figure out how I'm going to approach it. I think I've figured out how to get this apart. The problem is this stem is both permanently attached to the plate on the bottom as well as to the top, connecting it to the motor, and I can't separate them. But when I looked more closely, what I found was a bent pin. You can see it here, and it's as if this sleeve is sitting over this stem, and if I straighten this pin out and remove it, I think I'm going to be able to separate them and then remove the motor from this bottom plate. The other thing I noticed is, as predicted, once I began moving this around, I came up with those other 3 nuts. So put those aside, and let me work on straightening that pin. I've done a couple of things. I straightened out the pin, and this plate was just moving around too much, so I repositioned the knob, this on-off knob, as well as the nut to hold it a little bit more secure. And I'll try to remove the pin as well as show it to you. Okay. And there you go, that's removed. Now my other concern here is I have all these wires, so I really cannot remove this all the way. So now let me take a look to see how I can free up the wiring in here. What I found is these wires are running to a couple of wire nuts. I don't know how well you can see them. One is here and here, but I want to keep track of which wires go where. So I'm going to label them before I remove the nuts. I'll wrap a piece of tape around one set of them. And these other wires, I'm just going to mark with a red marker. And before looking to remove these, I think I'll get this plug out of the way, this socket. Okay, next I'll work on taking these apart, freeing up these wires, and once they're separated, then I'll continue. I freed up the wires. I should be able to remove this now. All right. So now I can start to figure out why this isn't working. Let's move this aside. And let me take a closer look at this and try to figure out the best way to take it apart. But before I do that, let me hook up the power cord again and we'll see if I can get this motor to run. I'm going to connect it with a couple of wire nuts. One and two. All right, let me plug it in and turn it on. And it's not running. Now, usually with these types of motors, when they don't work, it's because a lot of dirt and dried up oil sort of freezes them up. And if you give it a spin, it'll at least turn a little bit and then stop. But this one's not working at all. So this could just be a defective motor. So one option that I have is I do have several other Sessions motors that I have to take a look at, because although they're basically the same, they're quite different in how they're mounted to the mechanism. So not every one that I have is going to fit in here, and hopefully I'll get lucky and I'll take a look at what I have and see what I can come up with. Okay, I've come up with an assortment of them and I'll show you the differences. What I'm looking for here, this motor is attached to this plate by 3 nuts, one here, here, and over here. And the distance that this little platform is sticking out from the motor, I have to match. Now this is the same motor, but this one has little plastic legs on it and it sort of snaps in to the plate, so I can't use this one. This one looks the same, but these legs that are projecting out, they're further in distance from here as compared to this one. This one, instead of being secured with some nuts, it's kind of riveted to the plate. But this last one, I think, looks pretty close to what I have. It's got the 3 nuts holding it, and the distance to the plate to the motor looks pretty close to what I have here. So I'm going to look to remove this and remove this, and hopefully I can swap them out. So let me move all this aside and I'll get set up to do that. I'm assuming that the polarity with this, the fact that I label these wires so they get hooked up the same way, this wire would correspond to this one. So I'm going to put some blue tape on here the way I did on this one. First, I'll take this one off. To save some time, I'm going to undo the 3 nuts on my own, and then I'll continue. I've removed the 3. Let's try to lift this out of here. Okay, next, we'll do the same thing with this motor. And I'll remove the 3 nuts again on my own. These 3 are off. Let me take out this motor. And now, let's see if this will fit here. It's almost fitting. And yes, I think it's in. So what I'm going to do now, secure it with the 3 nuts, hook up the power cord. Let's make sure this is working properly. And if it is, I really have to take this whole thing apart. It's a lot of dirt and oil and grease in here, and I really need to clean and lubricate it if it's going to work well. So let's get this secured first. The nuts are on. I just have to tighten the last one. Next, I'm going to connect the power cord, and we'll see if it works, and I'll set that up on my own. The power cord is connected and it's plugged in. Let me turn it on. And it's running. It's a little bit noisy. What's different is the way these wires are coming out of the motor. They're very close to this gear that's rotating. And if I turn this the wrong way, the wire touches it and stops it from moving. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to keep these wires out of the way. I also hope I can lubricate it a bit and to quiet it down. So next, we'll take the motor out again, and I'll figure out the best way to open this thing up. I'll be removing the dial first. There are some tabs here I have to bend to remove the rim. Then I can take off the glass and the hands, and then I'll be able to access the gears in here. So let me get to work on that. But before I do all that, I want to show what's sort of a kind of a cool feature with this one. It doesn't have a second hand, but there's sort of a little red jewel in the center of it, and if you can see, that's actually turning. That would count as the second hand. Kind of cool. Anyway, and depending on how I hold it, it gets quiet. It is a lot quieter when it's held in the proper position, which is how it's going to be when it's in the case. So that's encouraging. Anyway, back to work. I'm having trouble bending the rim. It seems the metal is a lot thicker than what I'm used to seeing, and when I try to pry this up, I really can't budge it. Usually there's some cuts here, and you can easily fold each piece back, but that's not the case. And I don't want to force it and run the risk of cracking the glass. So an alternative to accessing the gears, I think if I remove these 3 nuts, this plate will come off, and that's going to let me be able to remove the gears that are inside. At least most of them. If any, the ones that are connected to the hands, I might not be able to take out, but let me at least undo these and see what we have. There's one. I'll do the other 2 on my own, and then I'll continue. I've removed all 3, but ran into one problem. In order to lift this plate all the way off, I have to remove the set knob, and I believe it's friction grip. I applied some WD-40 to it. I can't budge it. The stem is already a little bit bent, which is how I got it. I don't want to make it worse or risk damaging it, so I'm just going to try to lift up the plate, and we'll see what we get. So let's see which ones of these I can remove. That comes off. This one does not. This is holding the hands. As far as what's over here, let's see if we can turn this over. I may be able to remove this from here, which will let me clean it up. If I can't, I'll just get in here with a toothbrush and just really scrub it well. Same thing for the gear over here. So let me take a closer look and figure out which way I'm going to go. Turns out I can't remove this part, so I'm just going to go ahead. I have various sizes of toothbrushes to get in here, clean all these areas out. Use a bit of with a bit of alcohol. Look, you can see how much dirt's already coming off just by touching it once. Anyway, let me see how well I can clean everything up. Then I'll look to lubricate whatever I can and start to put it back together. I've cleaned all the parts as best as I could. A lot of dirt came off. And what I'm going to do next is lubricate with some synthetic clock oil all the spots on the gears wherever they rotate, in the pivots, any turning parts. Once it's lubricated, then I'll begin to reassemble it. I use some synthetic clock oil with an oil pin. I'll just show you one spot where I would be placing it. For example, this gear rotates like that, and where the spindle goes through a hole in the plate, I'll just put a little bit of oil right there. You don't place oil on the teeth of the gears, just where they rotate through little pivots and holes and whatnot. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and lubricate everything on my own, and once I complete that, then I'll be ready to put it back together. Everything's lubricated. Parts are moving quite freely. I placed one of the nuts holding this plate down. Now I'm going to do the other two, and then I'll be seating the motor, and I'll do that on my own. The motor's in position. I'm going to secure it with the 3 nuts, again, on my own. Okay, the motor is on, and a couple of concerns that I have. One is the way the wires come out of it are different than how they came out of this motor. This one's set like this, and the wires came off to the side. With this one, this wire in particular, it's very close to this gear, and as it rotates, I'm concerned that it could actually rub the insulation off the wire. So what I think I'm going to do, I may tuck this wire underneath the plate to keep it away from the gear. The other concern I have is how hard it's going to be to reattach this to this plate here, because when I removed the nuts, if you recall, or the screws rather, the nuts fell out of the back, and I'm going to have a hard time, I think, reaching that. If I can't, I may have to remove this completely from the case, but I'll play with it and give it a shot, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully, when I return, you'll see this fully attached back into position. And actually, one slight change in the plans. Another concern I have is the fact that the wires coming out of this motor are very long. Here they're quite short. So once this is in here, this wire is not going to reach where it's supposed to be connected over here. So what I'm going to have to do is cut a piece of this wire off, connect it here, same thing with this wire to here, and I think it'll be easier to extend these wires before I put this back into the case. So let me work on the wires first. I've cut the wires, and you may have noticed these wires were really quite black. They were covered in dirt. I cleaned them, and what I'm going to do next is solder each end of it to the end of the wire here. And what I'll be using is some heat shrink tubing. So once I make the connection, slide the tubing over the wire and then hit it with the hot air gun to shrink it. And I'll do that to both wires. That'll take quite some time. I'm going to do all of that on my own. And once these wires are completely reattached, then I'll continue. I can't resist showing each step that I'm doing. I've soldered the wire here and here. Now I just slide the heat shrink tube over it. And then I'll hit both of these with the hot air gun. That I will do on my own. I've completed the work on the wires. And now I'm going to look to reattach the clock to the plate inside the case, and again I'll be doing that on my own. It's back in the case, and it was incredibly difficult to do it. The problem, as I had expressed a concern earlier, was securing these screws here with the nuts that were behind it, and I was unable to do it, and I had to remove the motor and remove the plate. That way I had enough room to slide this whole part up to allow me to get a finger underneath it to hold the nut and screw it together. But somehow I managed to do it. I snaked the wires through. What I'm going to do next is just reattach each one of these wires with the wire nut, and then the next thing for me to try to figure out is how to get some kind of a back plate on this to secure this clock face so it doesn't keep popping out of the case. Anyway, I'll do the wiring part on my own. I've reattached both of the nuts, and what I want to do now is place the socket back into position. And we'll tuck these wires out of the way. There we go. And as I mentioned, let's see if I can come up with a plate to hold the whole thing together. Just an update, I thought I came up with something that would serve as a back plate. This is actually from an old Sessions clock, but it's just a little bit too small. It passes through the cutout in this case. So I'm still looking, but in the meantime, let's check to make sure that everything is working properly. I have it plugged in, and I'll turn it on. The drum for the fireplace is rotating. Turn on the light. And the motor, although I hear it, it's I think a bit quieter than how it sounded when I first got it working. Let me turn it over, see how the fireplace effect looks. And that's really not bad at all. Looks like flames, doesn't it? One thing that I was told, which really isn't correct, is that initially it was mentioned that these figures move on the base. These are fixed, they're not going anywhere. The only thing moving is the flames. But that's really not bad looking, so hopefully I'll come up with a suitable back so that this is secured. And till then, we'll wait. It's been a few days, and what happened was the woman who owns this one contacted me and said that she has another clock like this that belonged to her aunt, and she wants to send it to me, hoping I can use parts from that one to fix this, or if I'm able to fix this one, maybe I can fix her aunt's as well. So I got it today, and this is what it looks like. Same clock, and this one works. I plugged it in. The only problem is the minute hand is not properly attached. It floats around. And the only way to secure this is to remove the dial, get the rim and the glass off, which I cannot do. If you recall, the metal was just too thick for me to try to bend. I was very concerned about cracking the glass, so I really can't fix this one. However, what I can do, and she's okay with it because I reached out to her, I have the back plate here, which I'll take and put on this one, as well as this plate. Again, there is no plate on the bottom, but let me get started. I'll remove these and be able to finish up on this one. Just 2 screws holding this in. And a couple of nuts holding this. There's one. And two. Very good. All right, let's put this one aside. Oh, gold-colored bulb. I wonder if that's a difference in how the fireplace looks. I'll have to check that out. And I'll go with whatever looks better. All right, let me secure the plate with the two nuts. I'll do that on my own. I've done two things. I secured the plate. I also put the gold bulb in and found that the fire looks even better with this, so that's what I'm going to go with. We'll put this plate on. All right, now I'm going to set this up on my workbench. We'll plug it in and we'll give it a final look. I have it set up and plugged in and it's running. The fireplace looks good. It's hard to tell that it's moving because you really can't see that little jewel in the center rotate. However, I think if I do a couple of minutes of time-lapse photography, you'll see the minute hand moving quite quickly. So there you have it. It's a United Mantel fireplace clock. I believe it's from the late 1950s, early 1960s. I'm really quite pleased at how this one came out. I'm very happy that I got it working. The fireplace definitely looks good. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. And that pretty much wraps things up. Bye for now.